What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down some big news that's coming out involving geopolitics and Donald Trump, what's happening with the share price of NIO that you should be watching for all these different tickers as we're seeing more volatility in the markets. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total. And the offer ends at the end of March. Anyways, as far as NIO is going, as you guys can tell, we're looking kind of bearish here. We have this wick formula that's leading to this downside move. And we have this gap to fall all the way down around this 4.46 area, which I think is going to come very soon. So there's that risk of a bit more downside before we see some buyers try to defend. It's not just for NIO. I think the whole market is going to be following this trend amidst the bad news that's coming out. And despite the fact that the market was trying to bounce yesterday, we're not necessarily ready to bounce yet, and the market still looks bearish. Today, we got the PPI report. All the inflationary numbers were below expectations. The market popped a bit, but then failed to hold support, so it started to dump. And for now, the bears have a bigger edge. We have the Michigan consumer sentiment data coming out for tomorrow, so this might cause some more volatility, so get ready for that. This will help us understand what's happening with inflationary expectations and such. But besides that, the market still remains on a downtrend, and this could cause NIO to dip even more. So the question is, why is the market still bearish, and when do I think the market's going to bounce? I'll talk about that. Let's first talk about NIO. There is some good news coming out about the fact that NIO is seeing its ET9 getting a lot of attention. It's very, very good for luxury and factors like that. Despite that, we're not seeing some new ratings. I don't think NIO is getting too much attention yet. Maybe until next week we'll get it. But the price price ratio is dipping on NIO right over here because of the fact that there is a dip in the share price. The share price is dipping at least a little bit more because we're seeing some weakness right now, a lot of uncertainty involving geopolitics affecting a lot of these different pieces of price action. And we tend to be green only 49% of the time on Thursdays, so it's not really a surprise. Also, it's worth mentioning that NIO has earnings coming up soon, but we're going to be listening to see what they tell us about their margins and when positive cash flow could be coming. Many estimates believe that they may not achieve that until like 2026. So we'll see if that trend continues. We're also going to be looking at their balance sheets and what's happening with their shipments and such. We're going to be watching to see how other things affect them and how they end up, seeing growth as time goes on. So deliveries, expectations, overall growth, and their margins are going to be very important. So we're waiting for those. But why did the market sell off? Well, there's many reasons. Number one, Donald Trump is threatening 200% tariffs on alcohol for Europe, and he's threatening even more tariffs, which is causing the market to dump. The trade war is continuing. The European Union has said that they want to impose tariffs on about $28 billion worth of US goods, and Canada wants to now increase tariffs on about $21 billion worth of US goods as well, after the US increased tariffs on US and steel on them. So it's just kind of going back and forth with all these wars that are continuing. Donald Trump also mentioned that the US is getting ripped off over and over again, and he does not want that to happen anymore, so he's being very, very strict. He also mentioned that he called the EU very, very hostile and abusive, and he went on about that. So that's what is not the best for the markets because they haven't fully priced everything in yet. It's leading to more fear here and there. On top of this, I want to mention that Donald Trump said he's not going to back down US tariffs on Canada. He wants to continue to maintain these higher tariffs. Once again, saying that we're being ripped off. He said he's not going to bend over when it comes to the aluminum or steel tariffs or car tariffs. And then he went on about how, there's more to come, right? He suggested that Canada is going to become possibly the 51st state of the United States. And then he went on about that his tariffs are going to maintain their places. He's saying that he's not going to back down the 21% tariff on steel and aluminum. So he's saying the same things over again, that he's very fixated on keeping these tariffs elevated. That's causing some volatility for the markets. Now, despite that, I just want to say that there's been a lot of talk about how, the government shutdown could be coming as well. We need the U.S. Senate to basically pass a spending bill. Right now, the House has passed a spending bill that would temporarily fund the government up until September 30th. The Senate is now tasked at approving the same bill. But for now, we're going to be watching to see how this ends up going. They're continuing to argue things out. And there's a lot of fear right now because of the fact that if they don't pass this by Friday night at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we could be entering a government shutdown. What does that mean? That basically means that some parts of the government are not going to be some things could be delayed basically, and then some of the quote unquote non-essential workers are not going to be paid, and it's going to lead to a lot of changes. So we don't really want that to happen. It's going to be very, very painful, as the government has over 800,000 federal employees, and a large percentage of them are considered like non-essential workers. At least that's just a quote. That's what they label them as, right? I'm not saying anyone's essential or non-essential. I think that every worker is essential to some extent, but my point is that's just the point that the government's making, and this is going to affect a lot of Americans. So let's hope we don't get a government shutdown. It's going to be affecting other countries as well. It's going to be affecting the way in which the government funds different programs, and it could delay some benefits for some people, I heard. So not the best of news, right? We want to avoid this. I hope that the US government comes to a consensus, and we're waiting to see if the Senate could pass the bill by Friday. If they do that, then Donald Trump just has to sign it, and then it's going to be saving us at least from a big disaster. So this is not happening so far. They haven't really passed the bill yet. So there's a lot of fear right now that tomorrow is the deadline. They have to get it done with. They're continuing to argue. It's very tense, and that's also contributing to the market selling off. And then lastly, actually, there's two more things. Um, we also have some analysts who are saying there's about a 40% chance we get a recession this year. There's also some news involving Russia and Ukraine. So when it comes to the ceasefire, in the beginning, Russia was not really in favor of approving the ceasefire deal, but now they're saying that they support it, but they haven't officially signed it until they get some more things done. They want them to address a lot of the crucial details that need to be sorted out for them to do so. So keep that in mind, guys. That's what's going on. For tomorrow at 10 a.m., we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment data. The market is still extremely fearful. We're at the lowest amount of sentiment rating we've seen in a very long time, in years even. We're still in extreme fear and everything as the VIX is starting to rise again. So we'll see what this leads to. So keep that in mind. The last thing is that when it comes to our earnings overall, this is what we're looking at. There's not really much coming out for tomorrow, so just keep that in mind. So what is my prediction? I do think the market has a little bit more downside to come. We could be looking for NIO to potentially come down to finish filling this gap before you see some kind of rebound move. So be very careful, guys. I think that NIO might try to retest 4.79. And if we can't break that, we're going to be at risk of returning back down to fill this gap around 4.46. Then we'll see what kind of reaction we get. SPY is on a downtrend. There's no sign of a true bounce yet. It was trying to bounce yesterday, but I wanted confirmation, which would be a break of 565 to get that bounce. We failed to get that bounce. Even after we got a decent PPI, we still rejected because of all these geopolitical implications that are affecting the markets. So for now, we might try to gap up and we might see another move down towards like the 548 to 545 area. And then we're going to be watching for a bottom soon. So I really mean it this time. Even though the chart does not show a bottom yet, I believe that very soon we're going to see the market get a temporary bounce by at least 20 points. We're going to get a big bounce soon, a very violent one. We're due for it as the market's pricing all of this in. Maybe, this is just a theory, maybe Russia ends up having um, another treaty signed. Maybe they have a ceasefire that's signed over the weekend. Maybe it's the government shutdown being avoided that can help the market bounce. Those could be some good catalysts. We're still waiting for them. So perhaps the market may dip a little bit more from here, but then there could be a big bounce next week. So keep that in mind. We're bearish. We're going to likely dip lower, but there could be a big bounce next week. So make sure you watch 550 on SPY. If that fails us, we could retest 548 and 545, and we'll see if we bounce off any of those levels. Triple Q is looking kind of weak. We're trying to hold 467. If it doesn't hold, we could be looking for 465 and 462. We should be trying to bottom off one of those levels, and we'll see if we bounce or not. For now, we do look a bit more bearish, though. So there might be another dip move coming before we see some kind of rebound, especially with the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report. Consumer sentiment might be kind of weak with all this fear. The Russell 2000 is bearish. We're forming a bullish divergence, but we could be dipping towards 197 to 195 before some buyers step in. ES is just barely holding this trend line. We'll see if we could hold 54.80 if we get bought back up to hold the trend line. As long as we can hold this trend line, we will eventually get some kind of bounce move. But for now, we do look a bit more bearish. For NQ, we look a little bearish as well. We need to see if we could break resistance, so we could be dipping towards 19,000. We'll see if buyers defend or not. Bitcoin's kind of weak here. We're looking for 80,000 as our support. If that fails us, we could be looking for essentially 79,000. So we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For Nvda, we're kind of in the middle, so we're looking for support at 113. If that fails us, we're looking for a dip back down towards 111. If we break past 117, we're looking for 120. So we'll see if we get some kind of dip move before we try to bounce. So give it some time. For Tesla, not looking that great. I do think that this has more upside potential, but that depends if we can make a higher low here. So I do anticipate a little bit more downside. We could retest like the low around that 235 to 230 area. And in order for us to get a bounce, I want to see us break this yellow trend line. If we could break this, then there's a very good chance we push for 262. Might dip first before we see some buyers defend. Apple's bearish. We could be looking for a test of about 207 before it tries to bounce. Coin is looking kind of weak here, rejecting, so this may continue to fall to about 175 or below before we see some buyers defend. Amazon's kind of weak right here. I'm not liking this big red bar. It could be dipping closer to like 192, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get. Meta's kind of weak. We could be dipping towards 580, and we'll see if we get a bounce or not. So watch 585. If that fails us, then 580 could be coming before we try to bounce. Microsoft's on a downtrend. We could be dipping towards 375 or below before we see some buyers defend. And then Google could also dip a little bit more before we see some buyers defend. So I anticipate a little bit more downside. Might be seeing a 163 retest. The market is still kind of weak. One thing that's interesting is there's a divergence between the market and the VIX, because the VIX is already starting to slow down, yet the market's continuing to dump. That typically signifies the market's going to bottom very soon. I know we keep saying that, but I'm telling you, eventually it's going to happen. Maybe it's going to be after the government shutdown is avoided. So there could be a little bit more downside for now before we get a much larger bounce. With that being said, NIO is still looking kind of weak right here. We do have a gap dip, so be very careful. Then we'll see if we get some kind of big bounce or not later on. I thank you all so much for listening. So please have a good rest of your day, and I'll be back tomorrow with another update. Until then, look for a bit more downside as we have a gap to fill on NIO. Then we'll see if we bounce from there. Thanks again for listening, and peace out.